14 people watched. Not one of them said a word. That's the part that stayed with Dwight Okafor, long after everything else faded. Not the humiliation itself, not the hand on his shoulder, not even the words. It was the silence. The particular, careful silence of a room full of people who had decided, in the space of a single breath, that what was happening in front of them was not their problem. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, the kind that makes Atlanta feel like a different city. Cool enough for a jacket, the light coming in low and amber through the tall windows of the Harwell Grand. The hotel had been open for 11 years. Dwight had driven past it hundreds of times without ever going inside. He was there now because his new position required it. He had been hired 3 weeks earlier as the incoming general manager of the Harwell Grand's parent company, Meridian Hospitality Group. His first official week on the job didn't start until Monday, but he'd asked to come in early just to walk the property, get a feel for the place before the introductions and the handshakes and the PowerPoint presentations. He wanted to see it as a guest would. He wanted to see what was real. He wore dark slacks, a gray pullover, and a pair of clean white sneakers. No tie, no badge, no briefcase. He carried a small notebook in his left hand because he still liked writing things down. The lobby of the Harwell Grand was the kind of space designed to make people feel the difference between themselves and the people who belonged there. High ceilings, marble floors, a flower arrangement on the center table that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. 2 front desk clerks in pressed navy uniforms stood behind the counter, and a third was making her way across the lobby with a folded garment bag draped over one arm. Dwight stood near the entrance and looked up at the ceiling for a moment. He was thinking about the light fixtures. They were original to the building's renovation a decade ago, and he'd read in the property report that they'd been a point of pride for the previous management team. They looked dated to him now. He made a note. He walked to the sitting area near the east windows and took a seat in one of the low chairs, setting his notebook on his knee. A server came by and asked if he'd like coffee. He said yes, black, and thanked her. She smiled and moved on without a second look. He was on his second page of notes when Garrett Fitch walked over. Garrett was the hotel's director of guest experience, a title that had been created 3 years ago when the previous GM decided that head of customer service didn't sound expensive enough. He was in his late 40s, with the kind of tan that comes from a vacation home rather than outdoor work, and he moved through the lobby the way men do when they believe the room belongs to them. He stopped a few feet from Dwight and looked at him the way someone looks at a smudge on a window. "Can I help you with something?" Dwight looked up from his notebook. "I'm fine, thank you." Garrett didn't move. "Are you a guest of the hotel?" Dwight said he was not. "Then I'm going to need to ask what your business is here." "This is a private lobby." The word private landed a certain way. Hotel lobbies are not private. Anyone who has spent 5 minutes in the hospitality industry knows that. The lobby of a hotel is, by both design and legal definition, a semi-public space. Garrett Fitch knew this. He simply chose to use the word anyway because it had the sound of authority, and authority was what he was reaching for. Dwight looked at him for a moment. "I'm just having a coffee." "The coffee is for guests." The server who had brought his coffee was now at the far end of the lobby, and Dwight noticed that she had slowed her pace, as though she could feel what was happening without looking directly at it. "I ordered it," Dwight said simply. "She brought it. I'm happy to pay for it." "That's not really the point." Garrett took a small step closer. "I'm going to need to ask you to gather your things." There were 14 other people in that lobby. 2 were business travelers waiting for a car. 3 were a family from out of town with wheeled luggage, and a toddler who kept escaping toward the revolving door. The others were a mix: someone reading a newspaper, a couple sharing a pastry near the window, 2 men in suits talking quietly by the elevator bank. Every single one of them could hear what was happening. The lobby was not loud. Not one of them said anything. Dwight set his pen down on the open page of his notebook. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand up immediately. He looked at Garrett with an expression that gave nothing away, and he said, You're asking me to leave because of what, exactly? Garrett straightened slightly. Because you're not a registered guest, you didn't come through our reservation system, and this area is reserved for. For who? The question came out quietly, not aggressively, just, clearly. Garrett blinked. For hotel guests and visitors, with an established relationship with the property. An established relationship, Dwight repeated. That's correct. White looked at the two men in suits by the elevator. They had stopped talking. One of them was now looking at his phone with the focused attention of someone who is deliberately not watching something. Dwight picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, and set it back down. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, he said. I ordered coffee. I've been writing in a notebook. What specifically about that prompted you to come over here? The question was not rhetorical. He wanted to hear Garrett say it. Garrett's jaw moved slightly. It's standard procedure to check on visitors who don't appear to be guests. Standard procedure, Dwight said. And in the last 20 minutes, have you approached anyone else in this lobby to check whether they're a guest? Silence. Because I count at least 3 people sitting in this area who came in off the street. I watched them walk in. The couple by the window didn't check in. The gentleman reading the newspaper came in through the side entrance and sat down immediately. No one approached them. He paused. But you came to me. Garrett's face had shifted into something harder. I don't think I need to justify our procedures to you. I don't think you have procedures, Dwight said. I think you have a feeling, and I think you're acting on it. The lobby was very quiet now. Garrett reached for his radio. It was a small gesture, just touching it, not keying it, but it was meant to be seen. A reminder that he had resources Dwight did not. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. My name is Dwight Okafor. He said it the way you'd say anything true, without performance, without raising his voice. Just his name, in the air, in that lobby. I was hired 3 weeks ago as the new general manager of Meridian Hospitality Group. I start officially on Monday. I came in today to walk the property. He picked up his notebook and showed the cover, which had the Meridian logo embossed on it. A small, tasteful thing, the kind that only means something to someone who recognizes it. This is that walk. Garrett stared at the notebook. I've been making notes for the last 20 minutes. Dwight continued in the same even tone. I have 8 pages of observations about this lobby alone. The lighting needs to be updated. The flower arrangement is dropping petals on the floor, and no one has addressed it in the time I've been sitting here. The server, who, by the way, handled herself professionally, delivered my coffee and has not been back to check on me, which tells me either she's understaffed or she's been pulled away. He looked at the page in his hand. I also now have notes on the guest experience team. He let that last sentence exist on its own. The man who'd been looking at his phone near the elevator was no longer looking at his phone. The couple by the window had stopped eating. The family with the toddler had gone still in the way families do when adults are saying something the kids won't understand but can feel. Garrett had not moved. He stopped. Started again. Mr. Okafor, I want to assure you that this wasn't. I'd like the coffee to stay, Dwight said. I still have notes to finish. He looked back down at his notebook. He picked up his pen. Garrett stood there for another moment, long enough for the silence to mean something, short enough that walking away was still a choice he was making rather than a retreat. Then he turned and walked back across the marble floor toward the front desk. Dwight wrote 2 more lines in his notebook. He did not report Garrett Fitch that morning. That surprised people later when the story came out, and it did come out, the way things do in close-quarters professional environments where everyone is watching everyone else. People expected anger. They expected consequences delivered immediately, a kind of dramatic reckoning right there in the lobby. What they got instead was a man who ordered a second cup of coffee, finished his notes, thanked the server by name, her nameplate said Briella, and left. He spent the rest of the day at the Meridian offices on Peachtree, reviewing staffing reports and reviewing the last 2 quarters of guest satisfaction data. He had a 4 p.m. call with the company's operations director. He did not mention the morning. He wrote it in his notebook, though. He wrote everything. The following Monday, Dwight Okafor walked into the Harwell Grand through the main entrance at 8:47 a.m. He wore a suit this time, charcoal gray, no tie, because he didn't believe in making people feel underdressed around their boss on the first day. He carried the same notebook. The lobby had been notified that the new GM would be coming in. A small group had gathered near the front desk. The property's assistant manager, the head of housekeeping, two members of the front desk team, and Briella from the service staff, who recognized him immediately and gave a small, careful smile. Garrett Fitch was also there. He was standing slightly to the side of the group, and when Dwight walked through the door, Garrett's face moved through 4 different expressions in the span of about 2 seconds. Recognition, recalibration, something that might have been dread, and then the professional mask, the practiced hospitality smile that people in his position wear the way others wear a name badge. The assistant manager stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Okafor, welcome. I'm Denise Calloway, assistant property manager. We're so glad you're here." Dwight shook her hand and said he was glad to be there. He meant it. He moved through the introductions, names, roles, brief exchanges. When he reached Garrett, there was a pause. Not a long one, just a beat. "Garrett Fitch," Garrett said, and his voice was even, trained. "Director of Guest Experience. I look forward to working with you." Dwight looked at him. "We've met," he said. Garrett said nothing. "Last Tuesday," Dwight said, "I was in the lobby. You asked me to leave." The lobby had that qualities of silence again, the same kind from a week ago, but different in character. Then it had been the silence of people choosing not to intervene. Now it was the silence of people holding their breath. Denise looked between them. "I remember," Garrett said finally. "Good," Dwight said. He held the eye contact for 1 more second, then moved on to the next introduction. He did not fire Garrett Fitch that morning. What he did instead became the thing people talked about for a long time after. He spent his first week, all 5 days, walking every inch of the property. Not in a tour group way, where someone walks you through the highlights and you nod appreciatively. He walked the service corridors. He sat in the laundry room and talked to the woman who'd been running it for 9 years, a woman named Cora who knew more about the operational pulse of that hotel than anyone on the management team. He ate breakfast in the staff cafeteria 3 times. He asked questions and wrote down the answers. On Thursday of that week, he called a full staff meeting. Not the management team, all staff, every department. People who worked the overnight shift came in early or stayed late. There were folding chairs set up in the event space, and people took them slowly, with the particular wariness that comes from not yet knowing what kind of leader this person is going to be. Dwight stood at the front without a podium. He talked for 12 minutes. He talked about what he'd seen that week, not in the abstract, but specifically. The flower arrangement issue. The lighting in the east corridor that flickered and had been on a maintenance report for 6 months without resolution. The fact that the valet team had developed an informal system for prioritizing certain cars that had never been formally acknowledged or compensated. Small things, specific things, things that told the staff he'd actually been paying attention. Then he said this: "I want to talk about what this hotel is for." The room was quiet. A hotel is a place where someone is always away from home. That's the fundamental fact of this business. Every person who walks through that lobby is somewhere other than where they belong. They're tired, or they're nervous, or they're celebrating something, or they're grieving something. They are, in some way, on the outside of something familiar. And our job, the only job that matters in this building, is to make them feel like they matter anyway. He paused. That means every person who walks through that door. Not the ones who look like they belong. Not the ones who arrive in a certain kind of car or carry a certain kind of bag. Every person. If we can't do that, we're not a hotel. We're just an expensive building. He didn't look at Garrett during this. He didn't need to. 2 weeks later, Dwight sent Garrett Fitch a formal performance review. The first Garrett had received in 3 years that was actually specific. It outlined a pattern of documented guest complaints about selective treatment, 3 prior internal reports that had been filed and never acted upon, and the incident of October 14th, which Dwight described plainly. A non-white visitor sitting in the lobby was asked to leave without cause, while multiple white visitors in the same area were not approached. The review recommended a formal corrective action plan, a mandatory retraining on non-discrimination policy, and a 90-day evaluation period. It was not a termination. It was something Garrett would have to live inside of for 3 months, a sustained, documented reckoning that didn't let him simply lose a job and move on, but required him to change in place or leave by his own choice. Garrett completed week 1 of the corrective plan. He requested a meeting at the end of the 2nd week. He resigned at the end of the 3rd. Dwight accepted the resignation without comment, shook Garrett's hand, and wished him well in the way you wish someone well when you mean it as a fact rather than a warmth. Briella got promoted. Not immediately. It took 4 months, and it happened because she applied for a shift lead opening and was the most qualified candidate by a clear margin. Dwight wasn't involved in that decision. He had recused himself from any personnel decisions involving people who'd witnessed the lobby incident, because he knew how it would look, and because he didn't want the promotion to be about him. It wasn't about him. It was about Briella, who had been working that lobby for 2 years and knew every regular guest by name, and never once needed a notepad to remember an order. When she found out she'd gotten the position, she went to the east side of the lobby during her break, the same area where Dwight had been sitting that Tuesday morning, and she stood there for a moment, just looking at the chair. She didn't say anything to anyone about it, but later, when a reporter from a local business publication came to do a piece on the Harwell Grand's turnaround under its new leadership, Briella was the one who told the story. Not because anyone asked her to, because she thought it mattered. "He came in on his own time," she said, "before any of us knew who he was. He sat down, ordered a coffee, and started writing things down. He was just looking at things. Really looking." She paused, and then someone decided he didn't belong there. She didn't name Garrett. She didn't need to. The piece ran on a Wednesday. By Friday, it had been shared enough times that the Harwell Grand's booking inquiries had increased by nearly 30% for the following quarter. People wanted to stay somewhere, led by someone who'd walked in through the front door and been told to leave, and stayed anyway, and written it down, and come back Monday morning to make the place better. There were comments online, as there always are. The overwhelming majority said some version of the same thing, that they'd been in rooms like that lobby, that they knew that silence, that they wished someone had said something. A few said they would have. Most were honest enough to wonder. Dwight Okafor still keeps the notebook, the original one with the Meridian logo on the cover. 8 pages of observations from that Tuesday morning, written in the particular handwriting of someone who is paying attention to things others have stopped noticing. The last entry on the 8th page, written after Garrett walked away, is a single line. It says, "The flowers need to be fixed." Not a word about Garrett, not a word about the silence or the look, or the word private deployed as a weapon in a semi-public space. Just the flowers, still dropping petals onto the marble floor, still unaddressed, still waiting for someone to care enough to do something about it. He came back the next morning, and they had been replaced. Fresh white lilies, perfectly arranged, the kind that make a room smell like somewhere someone might actually want to be. He stood at the entrance for a moment, looking at them. Then he walked in, sat down in the same chair, and ordered a coffee. Nobody came to ask him why he was there. And if you had been sitting in that lobby on either of those mornings, the one where a man was quietly told he didn't belong, and the one where he came back anyway, which one would you have been? The ones who said something? Or the one who already knew the answer to that question and is only now, reading this, deciding what to do with it?